Bring us in.
Sure. Thank you for joining us this evening. Joining us this evening for the June 15, 2021 Monte Sereno City Council meeting. Before the meeting is called to order, I would like to point out a few house rules to assist council members, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate in this meeting. Council members, your microphone is live, so please keep your microphones on mute until you wish to speak. For tonight's meeting, we are using Zoom. Please use chat only to report technical issues such as being unable to hear a council member speaking. Please use raise hand to be recognized by the mayor and enabled to speak to the council. To comment under oral communication or any agenda item, you are allowed 3 minutes to speak per agenda item. Emails limited to 350 words can also be submitted to the city clerk and it will be read into the record. This word limit is set to adhere to the typical 3-minute time allowance. Only attendees using the Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participants calling in from the telephone will only be able to listen and cannot provide feedback or public comment. Lastly, because we are all not in the same room, all votes at this meeting will be taken by roll call. You're on mute.
Good evening. I call the meeting for June 15th of the Monte Sereno City Council to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lawler.
Present.
Councilmember Makachuk.
Present.
Councilmember Turner.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi. Present. And Mayor Leafold.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Radcliffe or Mr. Leonardis, any changes to the orders of the day?
No changes from me.
And seeing none from Mr. Leonardis, we will go ahead and move forward. We have no presentations today. Next up on the agenda is oral communications. This is the time for any members of the public who wish to speak about a matter which is not on the agenda to raise their hand and be recognized. If we have any members of the public who are wishing to talk to matters that are not on tonight's agenda, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Seeing none, we will move to written communications. Ms. Radcliffe, do we have any written communications that were late added to the packet or have not been added?
No, we do not.
All right, thank you. And now moving to the consent calendar. I will open the public section of the consent calendar. If we have any members of the public who are wishing to speak to matters 1 through, let's see, goes all the way up to 9 on the consent calendar tonight. If we have any members of the public wishing to speak to any of the items on the consent calendar, please raise your hand to be recognized. Seeing none, we will close public comment. If anybody in the public does wish to speak to the consent calendar while we're talking about it, we can go ahead and raise a hand. Actually, I now see Kevin Evans. So we will go ahead and recognize, we assume Mr. Evans for 3 minutes, or if you just have questions or wish to pull something from the consent calendar, please point that out to us.
Yeah, hi, this is Kevin Evans. I just want to be able to speak a little bit to the proposed budget. I don't know if this is the right time to do that or what. So
yeah,
maybe
so thank you. That actually will come up. That's on a public hearing section, which will come up later. We're now talking about just the first 9 items.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The agenda consent items. So no problem at all. We'd rather people speak up and get it right than not speak up and feel left out of the process. So we will come back to you when it's time for the budget questions.
Great.
Seeing no other members of the public for now, we will close public comment. Do go ahead and raise your hands if something comes up while we're talking about the consent calendar. We'll make an effort to recognize you. Do we have any members of the council wishing to pull any items from the consent calendar? Or if not wishing to pull, wishing to ask some brief questions that don't require us to pull? Mr. Makachuk.
Yes, perhaps the city manager could speak to the item on Dave's Avenue, or sorry, on Bruce, I think it is, or Dave's.
Oh, that would be the contract to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement to prepare plans and specifications for the Dave's Neighborhood Improvement Project. Is that the one?
Yes, that is the one.
Yeah, Mr. Leonardis, would you like to just give a little bit of background on that and then Dora answer any questions anyone has?
Well, certainly, Mayor. We have Engineer Jessica Kahn on the line this evening. I think she would be better suited to answer some brief questions on that project.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So the Dave's Avenue Neighborhood Project is a design for a curb and gutter and some traffic striping and pedestrian accessibility improvements. This is for an engineering design. So when we come into the next few fiscal years, we'll have the design ready to go to actually build the project. It also sets us up. If there are any grants available for this type of projects, it is part of a Safe Routes to School. The Better Streets Commission has been working with that Dave's Avenue neighborhood over the past 18 months or so on different potential projects for this area, and this is what we have landed on. We've discussed it over several meetings with both the public and the Better Streets Commission, and I believe there's a recommendation in the staff report citing exactly the recommendation that the Better Streets Commission gave to approve this contract. I'm happy to answer any other questions on this.
Yes, Councilmember Makachek.
Thank you. When I think of the Safe Routes to School and the fact that it includes sidewalks, could the scope of that include putting a sidewalk from Via Caballero through to connecting where the sidewalk starts on Dave's Avenue? Through the S-turn and through, I don't know, I think it's maybe 4 properties, in front of 4 properties.
I do know where you're referring to. That would probably need to be under a separate, it could be under a similar contract, but it'd be a different scope since survey work and things like that need to be done. It's a completely separate area. So it is very much the same type of work. It's just a obviously different location.
Thank you. I think that would be a real necessity for our community to connect the sidewalks on Dave's Avenue. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on either this item on the consent calendar or any other matters on the consent calendar? If none, do we have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Okay, I got a first from Councilmember Lawler, the second from Councilmember Makachek. Councilmember Turner? Councilmember Turner?
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler?
Yes.
Councilmember Makachek?
Aye.
Mayor Potem Elahi?
Yes.
And Mayor Lethal?
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Thank you. Moving now to the first of our public hearings. This is for consideration of a request for site development permits for the construction of new single-family homes on the newly created lots at 18061 Saratoga Los Gatos Road. First, we'll begin with a staff report and comments from the applicants. Then we will move to public comment, well, questions by council and public comment, then council discussion and a vote on this matter. So let's go ahead, and people who want to speak to this can go ahead and get your hands queued up at your convenience. Let's go ahead with the staff report.
Thank you. This is City Planner Jeannie Hamilton, and I trust that you can hear me.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to be before you this evening to present to you all the 2 site development permits for construction of new single-family homes and the associated tree removal permits for each of the lots. As you had mentioned, these permits are associated with the 2 lots recently approved by the council at 18061 Saratoga Los Gatos Road. And in fact, the final map was just approved as part of the consent calendar. As I presented in the staff report, each home is designed specific to the lot. And again, these are 2 lots served by a single driveway off of Saratoga Los Gatos Road. The front lot includes a single-story home with additional living space in a basement configuration. This is being used to minimize grading and also to meet the height restriction for this lot, which is limited to 15 feet above the highest natural elevation of the lot. Also included in this front lot is the removal of the 5 significant trees, as well as a front fence/wall within the front 25 feet, the front setback, which they would like to go up to 6 feet in height. That also needs the approval. The tree removals were addressed through the mitigated negative declaration, which was approved with the tentative map. So the mitigation included in that is also part of these permits. The rear lot includes a 2-story home, actually, with the design of this home using the topography of the lot, which, as many of you are aware, slopes down towards the lots on Arley Drive. The home appears to be single-story, back to back with the front home, but actually has a lower floor as that hill slopes down. This lot also includes the removal of 4 significant trees. Combined on the 2 lots, there will be 14 24-inch box trees planted as replacement for the 9 trees removed. The rear lot also does within the floor space an attached accessory dwelling unit, which utilizes that lower floor, lower story of the home. These permits were heard at the June 2nd Site and Architectural Commission meeting. There were no members of the public present that spoke to the project. The applicant's representative presented the project in detail to the commission. The commission reviewed the proposals and voted to recommend that the city council approve the projects as proposed and with the conditions as distributed to you all. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Council members, do we have any questions of staff at this point? Councilmember Makachek.
How many are there going to be any materials exported from the site? Any soil to be removed from the site?
Let me pull out the plans. There is a grading plan which gives those on sheet. Well, let me find it. And if I cannot find it, oh, here it is on sheet sheet 2 of the grading and drainage plan by Westfall Engineers. Up in the upper left corner, it talks about earthwork quantities. There's a total of 361 cubic yards of export. So they've really worked to minimize that. And I would say a lot of that is due to the basements area as well as the driveway.
Right, I understand that. 361 cubic yards is a lot of material, a significant amount. As part of the city's strategic goals for 2021-22, we had spoken about reviewing our fees. And if we were to change our road impact fees, they would be applied to the project when they go for a building permit. Is that correct versus the plan right now, the site development plan?
Impact fees are typically, yes, collected at the point of building permit issuance. Because without that, there is really no impact because there's no construction. So once the permit is issued, there's assumed to be construction. So there's where the true impact is. Hence, the city can collect an impact fee.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lawler, I think you had your hand up first.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think if Mr. Jeans is going to give the presentation, I can probably wait till after. Thanks.
All right, and Councilmember Turner?
Yes, you mentioned that there were going to be 4 significant trees taken out. And are we going to have trees to replace those before the construction, or is it going to be after the construction?
The replacement trees are, you can see on the landscape plan. And with any sort of project, you never really want to put the trees in beforehand because the construction is not going to allow them to survive. So they've been identified as to where they're going to go via the landscape plan. So typically the construction happens, and prior to it being finalized, that's when they'll go in and do the landscaping. And then when the project is complete, that's when we'll give the sign off.
Okay, so that's going to be a condition of approval, correct?
The project as conditioned has to conform to the plans that they've submitted. And as part of those plans is that landscape plan. And in the conditions of approval, if you see on page, or let's see, 13, the landscaping has to occur as included in the plans.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I will acknowledge we had a member of the public who has asked that we show the various sheets and items as we talk about them. Ms. Radcliffe or Mr. Kyson, our IT person, if you're able to simply click through on those, that would be great. Also, to any members of the public, if you're able to split your screen or use a second device, if you pull up the agenda, all of these attachments are accessible through the agenda, which you're seeing shared on the screen here. But we'll make an effort to pull those up when any in-depth conversation occurs about those items, or if specific questions are being raised. Was Mr. Jeans, were you expecting and anticipating to make a presentation? Looks like you have your hand up. I guess we can go ahead and recognize you on behalf of the applicant to speak this evening and give us a run through.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question I have is I have 2 projects here, so I just want to make sure that you're going to give me 5 minutes on each. And my question to you is, do you want me to treat them one after the other consecutively, or do you want to pause between the 2 and discuss each one separately?
Let's go ahead and discuss each one separately with a pause in between. I think everybody has reviewed the packet, so obviously for the benefit of the public and for us all to hear it from your perspective, you can take 5 minutes if you need, but it may not be necessary as your plans were both compact and comprehensive. So I think we have a good idea already, but go ahead and hit us with the highlights and then we'll run questions by you.
Okay, if possible, I would like to share my screen.
I think we can do that. It'll take a second to bring you up to panelist level. And I think it looks like you'll have that option up and running in a few seconds.
Okay.
You should be able to share your screen.
I am not seeing that. You've minimized your screen, but I do not see anything that allows me to share at the moment.
If you're on your PC, it will be bottom center for your share screen button. If you're on an iDevice, I believe it's going to be top center.
Well, I'm not at the moment getting a screen. It just disappeared on me. I'm seeing a very small portion on the right-hand corner of the page. So
Are you on a PC, Mr. James?
I'm on a Mac.
I'm on a Mac.
But what happened just now has never happened on any previous Zoom call with the, for example, Site and Architecture Committee. It was treated differently. Can you go back and try and start that again?
All right, are we looking at Mr. Jeans controlling the screen? Looks like we're in the process of releasing it to him. Let's see. All right, yes, we are seeing your screen, Mr. Jeans. However, you are still muted.
Okay, I'm going to go through the front house first. And these are pictures that you have, they're in the plans, so I'll go fairly quickly. This is the front house. You can see the driveway gate on the center, or you can see it on two of them, but where you go in, you can also see that I've provided a flat roof in the center so that we can put solar system on the roof and have that not visible, because if this is a scenic corridor, I did not want to have a solar array which would be facing the Saratoga Los Gatos Road visible to passers-by. So that's one thing that we did. So moving on, this is the front lot. The front lot is about 9,000 square feet. This is the site plan, and you can see two things on here that you should be looking at. One is the layout of the property, and I am asking for a site wall along the front. This, I'm showing you at the bottom, is what it is. It's 6 feet high at the columns, 5'10" at the wall, and in front of that would be a 30-inch to 3 foot high site wall. And if you see how the result will be after it is grown in, if you look over on the right, I'm looking at a site wall with Myrica californica and other suitable California varietals to go along the front. That would be in this area here. So the intention is that even though it is a wall, it is not particularly visible, but I think it would also be more attractive than the somewhat dilapidated wooden fence, which is in exactly that location now. So that's one element that I am asking you to approve with this particular project. Moving down, these are the elevation pictures. So you can see the actual elevation and more on the left, the renderings, which are more, which is more what you're going to see because the elevation has stripped out everything and it made it look very two-dimensional. We've got a series of gables. We're trying to introduce some elements to the roof to make it not look too flat, even though it is a flat roof because of our 15-foot height limit above the high point of the lot. The garage is at the basement level. This is called a daylight basement garage. So even though it does daylight out at the front, it is at the basement level. Round on the rear side, you can see there is a basement level door exiting out. Again, this is the rear portion facing the rear house. This would be the turnaround area, which is a fire truck turnaround. And the intention is to make it look like a one-story here. And when we get to the second house, it'll look like a one-story there too. And then I'm going on to the third house. So if you have questions on this particular house, let me know. There is about 450 yards of basement excavation, but we have used some of this on site. So we're only exporting 361 yards. When you approved the project next door at 18081, you allowed 4,000 yards of grading and export. So we're substantially less than that. I believe next door has reduced their grading quantity since your approval, but you can see that we're well below what it would be considered normal for two houses. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's go ahead. If any council members have questions specifically directed at the house on lot 1, let's go ahead and ask those questions. If it's for lot 2 or more generally, let's hold them back until we see lot 2. Yes, Ms. Lawler.
Thank you. A question regarding, I thought I saw on the plan somewhere a fence on the other side of the property that was in excess of that was like a 6-foot fence.
Yes, that's along this wall here. It's
Okay.
7 foot 4 inches. And you were not noticed, the public was not noticed. So staff has asked me to come back and go to a site and architecture hearing for that fence. So it's not being it's not specifically being addressed here, but just so that you're aware, this wall continues round and then back along that side. This is exactly where the cul-de-sac bulb, in fact, you can see a portion of it, where the cul-de-sac bulb of 18081 will be. And I'm expecting a lot of freeway noise, not freeway noise, but road noise from Saratoga, Los Gatos Road. And the noise consultant, the traffic consultant said, in order to minimize the, in order to be able to enjoy the backyard, you need a high wall along this side, and they specified the top elevation of that wall, and I complied with it. But that is not, unless Ms. Hamilton corrects me, I don't believe that is up for a vote today because it has not been noticed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Great, thank you for your question. Anything else on house number 1? If not, let's have Mr. James take us to house number 2 and walk us through the highlights there.
Okay, where am I? Okay, so this is the second house. And I seem to have missed a page here. Oh, here we are. Sorry, going to the first sheet. This is as you are looking from an aerial perspective on the rear lot. This would be what you see as you come up the driveway. This is the fire truck turnaround in front of it. And you can see that from this side, it gives the appearance of being a single-story house to match the single story on the first house. This area below, which is at the lower level, is actually the ADU, and I've put a living roof on top of that, so there's a patio on top of that. So the driveway, you share the driveway, you come in here. Here is the common turnaround area. This is the house that we're looking at. One of the key things that we have tried to do is retain all of the greenery at the back. In fact, the trees that we're removing a giant sequoia over here, which will eventually grow to be humongous. We want to catch it before that happens. The other trees being removed are down in the at the street, even though it's on this rear property, it's actually at the street. And there's a pecan which is being removed over here too. So we're keeping the foliage at the back. We have put the two energy dissipators that were discussed at the council hearing last time in the rear. So they're shown on the grading and drainage plan. Looking at the pure elevations and their corresponding renderings, you can see different perspectives and views of the house and the section. If you have any questions, please let me know. This is a covered patio area here. This is the ADU. I was asked to add a little detail on the two-story or semi-two-story walls. So I made pop-out windows here in this area to break that up and also break this up here. And that was Ms. Hamilton suggested that, and I think it improves it. I don't need to show you the colors. I think that's enough. You can look at the colors by all means, but that's it for this house.
Great, thank you very much. Council questions regarding House 2 or the plans overall? All right, yes, Ms. Lawler.
I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Jeans. These are very well thought out, and I really appreciate your thoughtful attention to detail and neighborhood aesthetics. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so yes, Mr. Jeans, if you'll stand by in case any other questions come up, we might come back to you, but otherwise, let's go ahead and open this hearing formally to public comment. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak, go ahead and raise your hands. We'll call on you in the order I see your hands come up. We do have Mark Stryker, I believe. It looks like you've got your hand up and ready to go. So we will recognize you at this time. Anyone else who wants to speak, please raise your hand.
Thank you. Yeah, Mark Stryker. My wife and I live on Arley Drive, and we're downhill from the property under discussion. So we're downhill looking up at the two-story house that we see, and the story poles are in, and we can definitely notice the house, but I want to thank Mr. Jeans and the property owner for keeping all those trees at the back. It's going to be a huge help. We really appreciate that. And also wanted to just thank, we've already constructed a fence to help with the noise and some of the sight lines. So I wanted to also commend Mr. Jeans and the property owner as well for that. So we do have some open questions about the drainage, but we've been working with the property owner to work those out, and just appreciate the saving of all those trees at the north side of the property. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I understand you are paying attention and working on the fence already. We've passed new fence ordinances that may allow even more privacy or potential variances if you feel it's necessary at some point. So
And
please talk
we're in
about
good shape. We've already got the fence constructed in a timely manner, and it, you know, and it adhered to the standards as I understand them. Mr. Jeans coordinated all of that. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good, thank you. All right, seeing no other hands up, I'll go ahead and close public comment and turn this to council discussion and or vote. Council members, anybody want to discuss this project or lead off in discussion? Councilmember Makachuk.
Thank you. The Site and Architectural Commission, what was their vote on this project? And did they identify any issues that were not addressed?
Ms. Hamilton, if you can pop back in and answer that, that would be ideal.
So again, as stated in the staff report on page 2, the commission, 2 commissioners had to recuse themselves. Well, I apologize. I got mixed up. There were 2 commissioners absent. So the vote to recommend approval was 3-0-2 with those 2 commissioners absent. They did not identify any outstanding issues, and again, as stated in the recommendation, was to approve each of the site development permits and tree removal permits as presented by the applicant and conditioned by staff.
All right, any further questions, Mr. Makachuk?
No, thank you.
All right, Ms. Lawler.
Just to confirm, the project requires the removal of 9 trees and you are replacing them with 14, is that right?
Ms. Hamilton, do you have the answer to that, or do we need to go back to Mr. G?
That's what I picked off the plans, correct?
If you can hear me, yes, it's 14.
Okay, great, thank
Yes.
you.
Right. Ms. Turner, did you have a hand up or have comments on the project? I'm getting a yes and a no. Okay, now we got a hand up but a no. Okay, thank you. Mr. Elahi, any comments on the project or?
No, it looks like a well-developed project. I think Mr. Jeans has done a good job of presenting it, and the neighbors seem to be on board, so I think I'm good with it.
All right, thank you. Yes, and Mr. Makachuk, you've got your hand back up.
I do. We haven't heard from you, Mayor Leuthold, but I would be willing to make a motion to approve the project, both projects as submitted.
Thank
And
you.
I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Let me go ahead and make my comment as well, and that is, I do want to say that I'm pleased with the involvement with the neighbors, the plans that appear to be very responsive to the needs of the lot and to the corridor. So yes, that's great. Let's go ahead and have our vote.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes,
Councilmember Makachuk,
Aye.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi,
Aye.
and Mayor Newbold.
Yes,
The motion passes 5-0.
thank you very much, everyone. Again, thank you, Mr. Jeans and the property owner for bringing us a project that was easy to understand and addressed everyone's concerns. So thank you. Moving on to public hearing number 2. This is consideration and approval of operating and capital budget for fiscal year 21-22. Let's go ahead and we will go to a staff report. Brief questions, public comment, and then council discussion and vote. So if there are members of the public, we will be calling on you after the discussion or after the initial presentation of this to council and some initial questions. So staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As you know, we have been working on the budget since May 18th during our pre-budget hearing. It's actually an annual process that sort of begins at the time we adopt the strategic goals. And we have our mid-year updates. We have all kinds of things that staff does during the year to facilitate council's direction according to the budget and the spending, the capital improvement budget, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the third piece of our budget meetings we've had since May 18th, one on June 1st, and now tonight. The proposed final version presented in ClearGov as of the fiscal 21-22 budget presented in ClearGov as it was presented to you last year. And the version that we have is a scanned version online. However, when the budget is eventually posted to our website, it is dynamic. You can float your cursor over the charts, bar charts, pie charts, and it will expand on those charts. I believe you have experience with that with the previous year's budget. So this is the second year in a row we're using this particular format. And with us this evening, we have Reynolds Samaranos, our Finance and Administrative Officer. We have Jessica Kahn, who wrote the capital improvement budget and is very familiar with the information in there. Jeannie Hamilton is here. We also have our IT professional, Dave Keyson, if you have any questions from anything that he may have presented in our budget. We did receive one piece of correspondence from the public, and the speaker was here earlier this evening. I think they might want to speak on this item about the street project on Xena Avenue. So that is part of the staff presentation. It is in the packet. And staff is open at this time for questions that you may have initially and for any of the staff members on the call this evening. That concludes my initial presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I do know that we did receive correspondence. We will have members of the public speaking to us and address their questions, any questions that come up in more detail as we move through this today. Ms. Khan or Mr. Samaranos, Ms. Hamilton, anyone, do you want to make a presentation up front on any of these? If so, go ahead and jump in. I see Mr. Samaranos, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Mayor Leopold, I'd like to make my presentation. If I can have share screen capabilities. So, choose screen.
There you are.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Leopold and City Council. I'm pleased to present the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 budget. If you can see my screen, I'm starting with the first page of my presentation. So the budget looks like this. Our city, Monte Sereno, has an organization chart that looks like this. We all report to the residents of city of Monte Sereno. We have the city council and the staff members of the team here at city of Monte Sereno. This is our mayor, Mr. Mayor Leopold, Mayor Pro Tem Wahi, Ms. Turner, council member, Liz Lawler, council member, and the newly elected council member, Makachek. Welcome aboard. So welcome to the City Hall. This is just some pictures that we put into our budget book presentation. A little bit of history of the governance of Monte Sereno. Some Wimberley walkway, sunset view of the city, and some stats that the city of Monte Sereno. So what is a budget? A budget is just simply a quantitative plan for acquiring and using resources over a specific period of time. Our budget is based on the general accepted accounting principles. The budget for government funds has been prepared on modified accrual basis, and so forth. Various fund structures, the government fund types, fiduciary fund types, and of course the law enforcement special revenue fund types. So in looking at our budget, we essentially have core values of financial sustainability, which includes financial stability, quality of life, and local economic vitality, accountability and financial planning, environmental and economic sustainability, transparency and engagement, website presentation of financial documents. This is our financial policies that we have. I'm not going to go through that in detail. We had a budget timeline that we set that began early on this year, back in February, and had previous meetings along the way. We met with staff to formulate this budget, and of course met with City Council to form a strategic plan and goals and objectives for the next fiscal year. So we started off with addressing what is the city's mission statement. The mission of Monte Sereno is to provide high quality services to residents in an efficient, transparent, and fiscally responsible manner that preserves and enhances the unique residential character of Monte Sereno, protects natural resources, and minimizes resident impact to the environment, and protects and enhances the health, safety, mobility, and welfare of residents. Last June 1st, City Council hosted their annual goal setting session. And from that meeting, we established these set of goals, which include quality public service, community character, enhanced mobility, community safety, and environmental sustainability. So translating those strategic goals for FY 2021-22, essentially outlined here. So staff took these goals and incorporated these thoughts and ideas into the budget that I'm now going to present. So looking at our budget from, again, my initial presentation will be from the 40,000 foot level, just looking at the big picture of the budget. So if I can enhance the numbers here. The FY 2021-22 proposed budget fund balance reserves are projected at 3.7 million by fiscal year end 2022, or 4.9 million if we're able to receive an extra grant of 1.5 million. Starting from an estimated 6.4 million fund reserve balance as of projected as of June 30th, 2021, 2.7 million will be drawn from those reserve balances if we execute all the capital improvement projects and other projects that's stated in this particular budget. So just looking at the numbers here, the bottom line numbers, we're going from the 6.4 million to approximately 3.7 million that's contained in this budget. Now, the sources of revenues for the city is really this. We're looking at a projected 4.9 million in source revenues. 3.5 million of that is recurring operating revenues, and 1.4 million will be drawn from general and capital improvement projects. And taking a look at the bottom line figures here and comparing, can you see that? So what I'm comparing is the operating revenues starts from this fiscal year, for fiscal year 2021. We have approximately 4.1 million of recurring revenues. Next year, in this coming budget, we're projecting 3.5 million in recurring revenues. And the basic difference between the two budgets is really looking at the Montalvo project that we that we did this year, which accounted for the main bulk of the difference of the 3.5. The 3.5 from the 4.1 million. On the expenditure side, again, looking at it from the 40-foot level, we're going from we're going from 4.9 million to 7.5 million in total. And looking at the recurring component, 7.5 million in total expenditures for this fiscal year, 3.5 million is recurring operating revenues, 4 million for general projects and capital improvement projects, 3.7 million. The major expenditures that we're looking at for this coming budget includes major CIP projects, which I'll go into detail later on in the presentation. But the message here is on the expenditure side, this fiscal year, it's 4.9 million going to approximately 7.5 million. And so just taking a look at the revenue component, approximately 47% of those revenues are coming from property taxes, licenses and permits, 14%, sales tax, 12%, and then miscellaneous accounts for the 8%. It's just a historical chart of how revenues looked over the last couple of years. So coming back to the specific details of the revenue line, again, coming back from 4.4 million to 4.9 million is really the big message of where we're going with respect to revenues for next fiscal year. Again, this is just a pictorial look of where the expenditures are being spent for this coming fiscal year. Again, it's primarily related to the CIP projects that we have projected in our fiscal 2022 budget. So I guess when we talk about the funding of our reserves, when we spend, I guess from the revenue, source revenues and all the expenditures that the city will spend, one slide. So we're going from the 6.4 million in the reserve balances, withdrawing approximately 2.7 million here, draws from the fund reserves. We go to from 6.4 to 3.7 million in balances at the end. And if we're able to get these pending fund resources that the city manager has identified, the HEROES Act for 600,000 and the Federal Highway Trust Fund dollars of 1.2 million, that would offset that deficit or reduction in the reserve balances, going from 6.4 to 4.9. And within our finance policies, when we talk about the reserve policy for the general fund requires that a minimum of 1 year of current fiscal year operating budget be reserved. If the general fund reserve falls below the desired level, a specific plan will be presented to City Council. When looking at this particular budget that we have here, the operating budget expenditures is projected to be 3.5 million. If we were to execute all the CIP projects, I'm sorry, if we were able to spend what we said we're going to spend within our budget, then that reserve balance will end up being 3.7 million after paying for all the general and CIP projects. And then, of course, if we're able to get that additional pending funding resources of 1.2 million, then that reserve balances will obviously be 1.2 higher than the 3.5. But then this is a little bit about the public safety. So if there are no questions regarding the revenues and expenditure side, I'd like to talk about the projects that that's in the budget that supports the 4 million that we would be spending for next fiscal year.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
You showed a graph. It's a stacked graph. I'm not sure what page it's on. It's right before the proposed FY 2021-22 budgeted revenue summary. And it's got a new element that's in there. And if you could just explain what that is, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, council member, I could check. What was the slide again?
It's a timeline and it's got that's it.
And what was your specific question?
What's the new element that's in there?
The new element.
It's the third item from the bottom.
I believe you're referring to that where blue decreases and something I think orange increases dramatically and appears there.
Oh.
Is that right?
That is correct.
I would think this item should not be in this graph. So I believe there's an error in this graph. Yes, this there must be a figure for this, which is that, and that should not be in the graph.
Okay, so what caught my eye obviously is an error. So should that be blue?
Yes, that should be blue.
Got it.
This should be moved up there, and that should be not in this particular graph. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so
all right, and actually, just to comment, I think we will see a decrease. We're going to be seeing a large decrease, and it may be just in the titles there. The large decrease is going to be in not receiving the Montalvo, which is that under license, that would be licenses and permits would be decreasing from around 1 million down to something more 600,000. Is that right?
That's correct.
My second question is, can you go through and explain exactly how much we get from the for the assessed value that the county gets, and then what percentage of that assessed value the city of Monte Sereno gets, and what influences that percentage?
So if I can,
yeah, that's a separate report that I'd have to call up. I don't think I'm in a position to present that detail.
I think Mr. Leonardis will be able to give us the high level or maybe even the exact numbers on that.
well, I would be able to definitely get that information to you later in an email this evening. We have to go back and look at the total assessed value of Monte Sereno, the percentage that we get from the county, and we can tell you what the number is on an annual basis. I don't think we have that information at hand.
I understand. I thought if the county gets its standard assessment at 1% of the value, then we get, and I'm not sure if it's 7.5 or 9.5% of that value. That's what I'm looking for, Mr. Leonardis. And
I believe it is 7.5% that Monte Sereno eventually gets from the 1.25% essentially of assessed value of property.
Yeah, actually, I think you guys are both optimistic on that. There's the number. Mr.
Yeah.
Samaranos has pulled it up. It's in the 5s. Yeah.
5.5%.
No, that's the percentage growth.
That is the growth percentage.
Yeah, but this is the assessed values for the city. So
So you can see the total assessed value, what they call the assessment roll.
So then from here, I have to see in detail how each component is calculated and given back to us.
All right. Yeah, those would be good numbers to have again, and also to share, make sure we share with the residents on our web pages, because it is a shockingly low number that we receive from the state, but it's what we get and it's what we work with.
And it's our biggest number.
Yes, it is. So, back to my screen. Okay.
All right. Ms. Turner, did you have your hand up, or is that a legacy?
Yes, I do.
All right. You had questions then.
So I just wanted to make some comments here. You know, for as long as I have been on the council, we have actually maintained our reserves at approximately 2 years of operating expenses. Our rules now require that we maintain at least 1 year in reserves. Is that right, Mr. Samaranos?
That's correct.
And we have actually done substantially better than that. Now, what we're doing is we're proposing an aggressive capital expense budget. We will draw down our reserves by more than 2.5 million. Is that right, Mr. Samaranos?
That's correct. 2.7
So
million.
this will put us right at the edge of our minimum required reserves.
Right at our minimum.
Yes. So we have applied for that 1.55 million grant, the HEROES Act, and the Federal Highway Trust Fund that City Manager Leonardis talked about. If those grants are approved, we will bring our reserves back up to 4.7 million. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's roughly about 1.5% of our operating expenses, right?
That's correct.
Okay, but at this point, these funds are not guaranteed, right?
That's correct.
So when do we know whether we're going to get them or not? Mr. Leonardis?
So all we have received is correspondence from NASU's office in the form of a letter. Still has to go through Congress and the House for some of the money that we would be receiving ultimately, and as well as the HEROES Act funding. There may be restrictions on the funding as well. Case in point, you know, the sidewalk gap enclosure project, the commitment that I sent a letter to council yesterday, it's $520,000. But that would be for the Highway 9 sidewalk gap improvements that we would ultimately be putting in place. It wouldn't be necessarily to go into our reserve account. Same with the HEROES Act funding, there could be restrictions on it. With that said, Monte Sereno has other revenue sources. So for instance, we received substantial, I mean, we had essentially a record assessment roll this past year, up another 5.5%. And the property values in Monte Sereno continue to increase. Once all of the Montalvo Oaks properties are purchased and turned over, those will produce some more property tax revenue. We've had some increased revenues from our building department fees and our licenses, as was discussed earlier. So we are optimistic the financial outlook for Monte Sereno will continue to be on an upward trend. And the reserves that are used will be ultimately replaced. The reason why I think you adopt the more astute reserve policies that we did last year with all the other financial policies, which are incorporated into this document again this evening and being, of course, put out for all the public to see, is to show strong, proactive fiscal management. You know, right now, keeping a ton of money in LAIF is not necessarily helping the city. Yes, it might bring more peace of mind, but the peace of mind that we have goes far beyond what's a normal reserve requirements for most jurisdictions. I mean, I would say we have the most aggressive savings policy. We have an account full of dead money. And council last year approved the project for La Ricanada Zena in the March of 2020 streets project. So it was right before the pandemic. And we have to take into consideration over time that if we continue to, so we moved the project up there for 2022, 2023, but then we adopted the new reserve policy, and that enabled us to potentially consider this. And we're presenting the information in that fashion this evening. But we have to consider the future value of these projects. The cost of those will probably be higher than the savings or the interest that we were going to be getting by having a bunch of extra money squirreled away in LAIF, which is sort of redundant if you have too much of a good thing in some respects. I will add on again that in the future, we will be receiving more money and we will be able to replenish those monies, whether we get the HEROES Act or the other grant, federal grant or not. And we also have to take into consider, you know, Engineer Khan's salary. I mean, she is here working every year. We pay her salary and benefits, which are probably upwards of $200,000 to work on these projects. So every year it's delayed. I mean, that's like another 10% of the project that she could be working on other projects and completing those on behalf of the city. So there's more to the equation than meets the eye with simply putting it aside and as additional reserves. I think the council was very wise last year to take the outmoded policies and reserve policies, and we didn't really have any finance policies, and adopt those great policies that we did. Those were derived from management partners. It came from the previous finance and administrator officer's retirement. Previous city manager hired management partners. They did an analysis. They made a series of recommendations. It's going back in history. And we presented a report to council. Council vetted that report 2 or 3 times during the meeting and very wisely adopted these new policies, which I think will serve the city of Monte Sereno better. But I do understand that the council, and this is one of the larger decisions that you're making this evening, you know, for Monte Sereno to spend $2 million at once, that is probably what I would consider a significant expenditure for the city, as far as I know in the history of the city. But the city does have the adequate reserves to do so. And I think it is something that the city will benefit from if council chooses to do so. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think, thank you. I think we'll have further discussion when we come back to council on that. We need to go through the rest of the presentation. We're actually not at the council discussion levels per se. We're more at the asking questions. We still have public comment to go through. So if we have questions specifically at Mr. Samaranos through what he's done so far, let's go ahead and get them asked. Otherwise, let's move on through the rest of his presentation and then talk to Ms. Khan about the pavement improvement and that capital improvement project and so forth.
Thank you, Mayor Leopold. So because the significant piece of the FY 2021-22 budget includes CIP expenditures totaling $4 million, I'd like to just show you specifically what that $4 million includes. So this is a, sorry, you can't read in totality, this is all of the citywide projects that we plan to do in this next fiscal year. And so I broke those up into, here's a general projects, which accounts for about 300,000. If you can see my cursor there. We have source funding of about 195,000 to help pay for that. We would be drawing approximately 116,000 from our general fund. This is one of them is the cable server, computer server cable project, which is about 57,000. I think if you have any questions on that project, we have our IT consultant in-house to talk about that. We have the housing element project, which is forecasted to be 200,000. We have source funding of about 85,000 to pay for that. Drawing 115 from our reserves. We have an SB2 grant that we won last year. We spent about 50,000 of that. We have about 110,000 left to use on that. We actually haven't identified what project we'll be using for that. So that's actually being added to our reserves. But once we execute a plan to do that, then obviously that will be used to pay for that particular expenditure. And then, of course, we have the unfunded pension liabilities of 55,000. Then we have an Arbor Day City Tree Fund project, which doesn't cost the city anything, but that's another project that we have listed. So the big ticket items on the capital improvement projects, that totals 2.5 million, I'm sorry, 3.7 million in total. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects here. And I'll go through them in a little bit more detail. We have the City Hall parking, 7 million. Which will be paid for by the road impact fees. We have the City Hall Annex Building Improvement Project, which was approved last year. We have it in our budget for costing 600,000. Getting about 220 in source funding, cost drawing from the reserves 383,000. At the Davies Neighborhood Improvement Project, costing 85,000 from the reserve budget. We have the Warrant Neighborhood Improvement Project. That's the big item, which was projected to be 2 million. We have drawing road impact fees of 65, net 1.9 million. We have the Highway 9 Safety Improvement Gap Closure Project, which is slated for 600,000, which will be entirely paid for by relief funds and the TDA. And then we have the Winchester Boulevard Class 4 protected bike lanes. That one's going to be, let's see, 400,000. Netting the drawing from the reserves 130. And then we have an emergency backup generator. So those are the major projects that we have in our budget. And should council or residents have questions on that, I think we have City Engineer Jessica Kahn to hopefully answer those questions.
Great, thank you very much. Council members, any questions based on what you've heard so far? Seeing none. Ms. Kahn, did you want to jump in at this point and make a presentation about the Rinconada or any of the other projects, or would you prefer to hold back and wait for specific questions?
I am happy to answer any questions you may have, but I do not have a presentation this evening.
All right, thank you. I have a question and really would just like you to kind of speak for the record a little bit about what we're looking at in terms of what this concept of pavement improvement is, what neighborhoods have been done so far, and why Rinconada at this point in time.
Sure. So I believe last March, I gave a presentation on general pavement improvement in the city and presented the neighborhood improvement projects. And basically what they were, what type of improvements they were, and also how I came to the prioritization matrix. So the prioritization matrix just briefly has to do with suitability for improvements. If there's sidewalks there, if it's on a route to school, if it's maintenance by both us and another entity such as the county or the town of Gatos, and then the pavement status, the PCI, or how good or bad the road is. So the Warrant-Kenyatta streets that are part of this project came up to the top basically because they have very poor pavement quality. There's some of the lowest PCIs in the whole city. And they were also part of a neighborhood that was not considered rural. It's considered more of an urban neighborhood, and other streets around it also have curb and gutter. So it fits the neighborhood, the overall neighborhood. Also, so similarly, the Dave's Avenue neighborhood improvements is one that also meets that criteria. Bruce and Vista have very poor pavement qualities. The streets around them have been improved with curb gutter and some sidewalk. And that's also why it floated to the top of the neighborhood improvement project prioritization matrix. So that's how we landed on those two projects coming to the top. There's other projects further down the line that also have high priorities, but these were by far and away the two neighborhood improvement projects that came out of the top of that prioritization.
All right, thank you. And just to kind of verify that I heard correctly in your last presentation, you come at this kind of from two directions in terms of pavement improvement and choosing these plans. One is to maintain the streets so they, the good quality streets so that they don't deteriorate on the one end, and then to address some of the worst streets so that we get them taken care of and dramatically improve them, especially if they don't have the curbs and gutters which hold the streets together. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yes, and the reason that these streets are now, the two proposed projects are still pending, we have not improved those streets. Those are some of the worst streets, but we've been holding off improving those worst streets in our general pavement annual project because we knew that there was possibility to do the curb and gutter to maintain to extend the lifetime of the streets.
All right, thank you. All right, do we have any other council member questions before we open public comment? Councilmember Elahi.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand this is basically based on trying to get the best buck for the streets. And it's important to spend the money now rather than later if you have it, because the costs are going to go up. So I understand City Manager Leonardo's discussion on that subject, and that's why I think we're going forward to do it. Hopefully down the road next year or the year after that, the budget will balance out. I am a little curious on the process because the cost like on the Warrant-Kenyatta project is $2 million. I was wondering if you guys can illuminate us as to how the bidding takes place, on who do you select to do the projects, and how do you come up with the best contractor for the particular project? Is that an open bidding process, and how does that work out? If City Manager Leonardo can illuminate us on that, that may be helpful. Is there any way of getting discounts, I guess, is my other question.
I will let Engineer Khan describe the process and what the next steps will be going forward, assuming that council would approve the item, which I assume is the Warrant-Kenyatta Streets Project, Xena Streets Project, the $2 million bid.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big one. So I thought that might be a good one to use as an example as to how the city gets the bids and how does it choose on the contractors.
Sure. So it's the same actually for both the Warrant-Kenyatta project and the City Hall project. The city, either I or the contract engineer makes the bid sheet. So it has each individual item and quantities, and then we put it out to bid publicly. So we publish it in the paper as we're required to, and we also put it on the electronic bid boards. And then we give it about 2 weeks after we publish it, and we receive bids at City Hall. We open them publicly in front of everyone who submitted the bids, and we are required to go with the lowest responsible bidder. So after we open the bids, there's an apparent low bidder, and then I review all the bids to make sure that there are no errors in their calculations or there's no other conflict of interest going on with the bid submitted. And then we're required to go with the lowest responsible bid, or we are allowed to not do the project at all and throw out all the bids and either not do the project or rebid again. But there's really no selecting anyone but the lowest responsible bidder of what you received in your public opening bid.
And I'll supplement that as well. The process for bidding public works projects by public agencies in California is prescribed by state law. So generally, the city engineer is correct that there is really no way for the city to select who the bidder is going to be beforehand. Really, the city does have to award the contract to the lowest responsible bidder. Responsive meaning that they submitted a complete and total bid package, and responsible meaning they're qualified to do the work. And generally, there's no real opportunity for the city to negotiate for any sort of public works projects. Additionally, wage requirements are subject to prevailing wage laws in California. So typically, the council can set what it is willing to budget for a project, which is typically based on the city engineer's assessment of what those projects will cost in the market. And then if bids don't come in, at or below the budget, either the council can revise the budget or it can, not move forward with the project.
Excellent. Thank you for the explanation. I was curious on the La Rinconada project. Have you already got the bids on these, or you're going to be submitting for bids after the city council approves the budget? And if you have gotten the bids already, how many bids did you get, and do you have a range on what the bids were?
Assuming that this is part of the approved budget, I would be putting this project out to bid in the next few weeks. And I would expect to have a contract to bring to the council at the first meeting in August. Over the past few projects that we've bid, we've gotten quite a few bidders, I'd say around like 5 to 10. So I'd expect about the same amount for this project.
And do we look for the developers or who is bidding the project to have union laborers employed there, or is that a part of the consideration that they must use union laborers or not? Or does it matter?
So that actually is determined by state law. There is no specific requirement, I believe, that the contractor be a union shop, but they are basically obligated to pay prevailing wages, which take into account things like the cost of union labor. So they're effectively going to be paying, similar rates regardless of whether or not that contractor is a union shop.
All right, and there's no, just to be sure, there's no outside influence by anybody, the city council or anybody else doesn't try to influence who gets the project. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's possible.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Lawler.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say, investing in our road infrastructure is very important. Our roads have been allowed to deteriorate for far too long, and now we have the ability to bring them back up to speed. And we do this, and they translate into long-term cost savings for maintenance. So that's critically important that we focus on this. My question to you, Ms. Khan, is based on your knowledge of our streets, how many more big projects like this do you anticipate before we can bring our city to our PCI goals?
So the PCI is strictly pavement condition. So if we never did a curb and gutter project ever again, we could still meet PCI goals, but the roads wouldn't last as long because there's not a road edge. And so we'd have to keep doing more maintenance to keep our PCI up. In general, the number of projects you could do for streets is endless, obviously. But as far as ones that have been identified, I'd say beyond the 2 presented in this budget, there might be 2 or 3 more that those type of curb and gutter and drainage projects would be appropriate. There's definitely streets such as Withy, for example, in the city where that isn't really an appropriate type of treatment for that street. So I wouldn't propose doing that kind of project. So did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we go ahead and open formal public comment and then bring it back for council discussion?
Yes, I've got a question.
Yes, Mr. Mekachev.
I know that when the town of Los Gatos was putting in all the new concrete in the almond grove, it was very expensive, and they took great care in ensuring that the other utilities and anything underground was going to be addressed prior to the putting in the new concrete. And I'm wondering, when you look at the houses in the area where this $2 million project is going to be, do we foresee any big projects there, any undergrounding of utilities, anything that we need to know in advance? That's a question for the city engineer.
Sure. So for every pavement project, including this one, I collaborate with utilities. So San Jose Water, West Valley Sanitation, and PG&E for any pending projects they may have. And then I tell them what streets I anticipate to do every year. So usually I have a forecast a few years out of what the major utilities are planning to do for like major replacement and repair work. That's, for example, why Greenwood Road hasn't been redone lately, because there's a major water project coming up there in the next couple of years. So for this Xena project, this La Rinconada neighborhood project, no, there are no planned major utility projects on those streets in the next 5 years. And then after the project's done, there'd be a street moratorium for any kind of major utility project. Not to say that it wouldn't be cut into if someone needed a new sewer lateral or something of that respect, but there would be no major trenching of the street for at least 5 years.
That's great. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Elahi, do you still have your hand up for an additional question, or no?
Yeah, I just had to follow up. The La Rinconada project, do you expect that to complete within 1 year, or is that going to spill over to the following year? And then you also mentioned there may be 2 or 3 other projects similar to that. So do we anticipate spending another, what is the estimate of cost on those? Are those going to be similar to the La Rinconada project? Do we need to budget about another $4 or $5 million of expenses over the next 2 or 3 years? If you could shed some light on that.
To answer your first question, assuming that this is part of the budget and we get bids and they're favorable, I would say this project will be done by the end of fall this year. It'd probably be about a 2 or 3 month project. As far as other future projects, the only one being planned right now is the Dave's Avenue project, which the design is part of this budget. And in general, we like to spread those projects out. So this Dave's project would be designed, but then not scheduled in the CIP for several years, which I believe is reflected in this budget. And then similarly, we would plan a few years ahead to do a design and then get an idea of what the budget is and forecast it out several years into the CIP. So depending on how aggressive the council wanted to be, we can definitely move those up or spread them out more, but it's always good to have something designed so you have some kind of idea of what the project will entail, and you can adjust the budget as with inflation or other considerations.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess we don't have a crystal ball. I was just trying to get a ballpark figure on what the estimated cost would be for these other projects. Are we looking at the same range as the La Rinconada project, or is it going to be higher or lower?
So I don't have that information with me, but that was included in that first presentation I gave with the neighborhood improvement project overview. There was some cost estimates, which were now 20 numbers, so a year old, but you could put the cost of inflation to it and determine what those would be. I don't have that on me this evening, but I am happy to provide that to you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead then and formally open this to public comment before we bring it back to council discussion. I know we have at least one member of the public wanting to speak on this. So let's go ahead and recognize Mr. Kevin Evans here.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate this. And by the way, the effort to reach out to us and share materials like this is really, really quite nice. It's the first time I've actually seen and been involved in this, so I'm a little bit new to it. But I am a 25-year resident of Monte Sereno. I live on the Encantada, retired CEO and CFO of both public, private, and non-for-profit companies. And so I kind of understand the budgeting process and the like, but I have no road construction experience, so I don't try and guess at things I don't understand. And I have had some communication with the city manager, who's been somewhat helpful in trying to guide me to the right places to understand this. If I look at the budget and I understand it as it's presented, which is actually quite nicely done and easy to understand in my view, what we're talking about is a $6.4 million fund balance being reduced by more than 40% to $3.7 million and an annual increase in the budget of 50%. Now, that is noteworthy, to put it kindly. That does not meet my view of what would be financial stability and financial prudence in seeing any sort of a budget increase like that, or burning of a reserve at that rate over a one-year period is simply not something I've ever experienced in my situation, except in the event of an emergency. So I find it really difficult to believe that we want to spend $2 million to benefit the roads of 46 homes of the 1,100 homes that we have. Basically really want to express my real concern for that kind of a shocking point. I don't have anything else about the budget to talk about other than $2 million for a couple of streets, which I walk on, which aren't in great shape. I get you, I got that. But how fast and how quickly can we fix that? I can tell you that 15 years ago, when I remodeled my house, I was asked by the city to put in my own gutter, and I put it in at my expense. I actually had to also pay for a encroachment permit, I believe at the time, but we put a gutter in. The gutter, I had problems with drainage and all kinds of issues, but I simply addressed that as a resident. So I just really want to go on record saying that somebody needs to really take a hard look here and at why we would take such dramatic spending increases in 1 year. That's it.
All right, thank you for your input on that. If there's anyone else in the public wishing to speak, please get your hands up and we will recognize you. Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring this back for council discussion. So council members, I know, go ahead, Mr. Mekachek, you got your hand up first.
Thank you. I'm wondering, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Kevin for his comments and his insight. I'm wondering, to simplify things, if we can separate the budget into two components. One's the ongoing side, and then the other is the capital improvement side. And if that would simplify our process both now and in the future, because understanding what our ongoing budget is just to run City Hall and the police, etc., you know, that's our ongoing commitment. But then everything else is kind of a one-time or a series of one-time projects. So I'd just like to put that out for council to think about as we go through this in the next little while.
Thank you. And I would point out that in the budget sessions and planning and giving input to Mr. Samaranos, And then in reaching the budget, we did a lot of work to do what you're describing, which is to make it very clear as to what are the ongoing expenses and ongoing revenue sources versus unusual expenses and unusual revenue sources. And that's why we are able to have this discussion so clearly with the budget, with the 3.5 to 3.7 million of our regular budget. That defines our reserves, puts us at the 1 year mark, which is the city council stated goal, and leads to this. So I think we're well on the way to that, and that's obviously something that we can continue to work on and separate. Ultimately, we have to approve a budget, and that does include all the different components of capital improvement and the components of ongoing revenues. And they both have to be done by the end of June, which is why we're here on this timeline. So other council member questions and comments? I know Ms. Turner has some ideas that she wished to bring forward for the council to potentially consider here. She and I, under the Brown Act, had some discussions and looked at some language that she wanted to include potentially in the budget if other council members agree. I'm not sure, based on the input we've seen tonight, whether all that's still necessarily appropriate, but I think Ms. Turner, would you like to present what you want and why? I know Ms. Radcliffe can bring up some language that you and I had talked about earlier under the Brown Act.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Leuthold. I wanted just to say that we're still in difficult economic times. The pandemic isn't over. California still operates under a state of emergency. I want to be sure that, in my opinion, this is not the time to be taking unusual financial risk. I think the responsible thing to do is to manage our finances conservatively, because we simply don't know what the future holds. We've never been in this situation before where 300,000 businesses have actually closed in California. I want to be sure that we have enough money to pay our staff salaries, the police department. So what I'm going to propose here is that we make our capital improvement program contingent upon getting the $1.5 million in grant that we are expecting. Some of these projects could be postponed if we don't get enough of the money. Let's prioritize what we do to these projects as the money becomes available. If the grants are approved, we do them all. But if we do not get the grant money, we take a more conservative approach, keep that extra $1 million in our reserves, and be better prepared should things take a turn for the worse. So that is my recommendation to the council. And thank you for that, Mayor Leuthold.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the language that you're proposing that would accomplish that is what Ms. Radcliffe has brought up on the screens, essentially adding to page 43 a paragraph
I kind of put summaries in all these things.
generally to the effect of, let's see, it looks like we wanted to see if you can make the text a little larger, Ms. Radcliffe, and we'll do these one paragraph at a time. Can you zoom us in? So I'm going to go ahead and read this, which is what Ms. Turner would like to consider as if people are interested in her staged proposal and keeping the reserves higher than the minimum reserves. This is language that she thinks would be appropriate to accomplish it. On page 43, it would say, it would have an addition that would say the projects below represent a drawdown of the general fund reserves of 2.53 million. Our expectation is to replace 1.155 million in reserves through grants through the HEROES Act and Federal Highway Trust Fund. To fully implement the projects, grant funding is essential. These projects will be timed such that major construction expenditures coincide with the availability of the grant money. If the grants are not approved or delayed, some projects will be postponed or suspended to reflect the reduced available funding. And then a second paragraph, if we can scroll down, would add on page 46. Due to the pandemic and uncertainty in the economic environment, the council believes that for now, it is prudent to maintain our reserves above the legally mandated minimum level, closer to the $4.7 million level. This can be achieved with the anticipated $1.155 million in grants requested through the HEROES Act and Federal Highway Trust Fund. Should these grants not be approved, CIP programs will be reduced or suspended to reflect the reduction in available funds. So let's go ahead and have some discussion about this potential change, and then see if there is a proposal and a vote. So Ms. Lawler?
Thank you. Well, I always applaud fiscal prudence, so I have no issue with these. I do suggest maybe changing the word will to may. Programs may be reduced or suspended, if that's all right, in both paragraphs. Just substitute will with may.
And, you know, if I may sort of provide some suggestions here, you know, when the council approves the budget, they're basically, you know, earmarking the funding for projects and authorizing staff to proceed with, you know, moving forward with them on the assumption that the city will undertake them. You know, the issue with language like this is it does potentially introduce some ambiguity as to what is and isn't authorized under the budget. So my suggestions would be that the council can do one of two things. The council can either strike for the time being certain projects from the capital improvement program and from the budget. And then if the city does receive the anticipated 1.15 million in funding, city staff can certainly come back and, you know, seek a budget amendment from the council. Council is going to need to act anyway to accept the grant funding and appropriate the money. Alternatively, the city can just leave those projects in the budget as is, knowing full well that staff still have to, in order to move forward with these projects, bring the projects to the council for approval, including for approval of the construction contracts and or any other planning agreements to do design work, things like that. So, you know, if the council hasn't received the grant funding, the council can just not approve the next step in terms of awarding the contracts. And without the contracts, the funds won't be expended. So, you know, those are two potential alternatives. You know, removing, you know, projects from the budget would probably be the more conservative out of the two, but certainly even if the council anticipates or decides to leave those projects in the budget, it would still have significant control over whether or not those projects move forward. And, you know, at any time, the council obviously can revise its budget. So those are sort of my thoughts on this issue.
Thank you for that, Mr. City Attorney. Yeah, and I wanted to go ahead and address, since I've kind of been working with Ms. Turner on this, and I'm very aware of her concerns on it. At the same time, I want to address both the concerns brought up by Mr. Evans and also the reality of why we're here and what this city council has done, really correcting what I see as very significant errors of predecessor city managers and predecessor city councils, where they built up the budget to as much as 2 and 3 times the annual budget. They built those reserves up at the expense of millions of dollars of unfunded streets work over a course of nearly 20 years. And that is really something that we are paying for now because the work that should have been done wasn't done, and our reserves were ridiculously high. And there were reasons for that, which we don't need to get into about why those reserves may have been built up. Mr. Leonardis pointed out our reserves, even at one year annual budget, are extremely high relative to most cities. And as Mayor Pro Tem Elahi pointed out, spending this money now is savings in the future. both in terms of the better streets not deteriorating as quickly and not having to pay more for inflation later on. In fact, Mayor Pro Tem Elahi has brought up over and over that we should actually be doing borrowing in order to get these projects done and more quickly. So in light of that, my thinking about this is, while I'm receptive to Ms. Turner's concerns and love her as our budget hawk, that she's always watching out for this, I do see that we should be advancing these projects. They are within our fiscal policies. And so my thinking is to move more with what the attorney said, which is to go ahead and approve the projects. We will get one more look at them when the bids come in, and we could either delay them or choose not to do them at that point in time. So I would be less conservative and more liberal on these, but I'm open if other council members want to back down to the more conservative places. Let's go ahead and talk about that. That would be an amendment to that would be offered before we adopt the budget. So that would, this is the time to talk about that. Ms. Lawler.
Thanks. No, I actually completely agree with you. I think that's definitely the right path to go, because we are preserving the ability to do these projects and preserving the ability to decide later on if we can. So I agree with your approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council members, Mr. Mekachuk.
Yes, I agree with what was just said, Mayor Luthold and Councilmember Lawler. If we leave it in the budget now, it at least we can move forward. We can get bids. Then we, as was pointed out earlier, we don't have to accept those. And then if we say we're stopping the process because we don't have funding, then it would be easy to start that process again, I believe, because the people that bid on it would have, they just have to sharpen up their pencil or, you know, put in the same bid. So I would agree with that. And I do understand that we are paying for deferred maintenance, and it is a big number, and our reserves did grow dramatically over the past number of years.
All right, thank you. So it sounds, Ms. Turner, if you do want to present yours as a modification or make some argument here, that's certainly fine, because we are certainly listening to what you have to say here and take your concerns seriously.
Yeah, what I would like to see, and I will compromise here, is that when we get a contract, that the contract is divided up into 3 parts. I think Ms. Khan said that the last time that there were 3 streets that we can actually do it separately. So when we get a contract, I'd like to see one that's a $2 million contract and one that is divided into 3. So if we don't have enough funding, then we have the option of picking and choosing.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a good point. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And if we can get those breakdowns, there may be significant savings for bundling them all that we may choose to pursue. But at the same time, if especially if anything is turning as we're looking at this in the economy, if we wanted to make a more conservative choice, that would be nice to have those options open to us. All right, so Mr. Elahi.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's not going to cause any problem with the bidding process. I suppose the bid would be either give us a bid for all the projects, or the bid would be give us plus give us a bid for each separate item. Is that going to cause any issues, Ms. Khan?
So for the Lawrence Kenyatta project, that's actually very easily what they're called is add-alts. So you bid a base project. So you'd pick one street that's your project, and then the other street would be alternates that you may or may not choose to be part of the overall contract. For something like the community center, that might be a bit more difficult because it's one building, not multiple buildings, and there's far fewer discrete pieces of it that you could bid separately. So that might be a bit more difficult, but for the road project, that's very easy to do.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
just to
I think it's
clarify,
all
I think that the city council, that the city building is one, Highway 9 is probably its own discrete project, especially since that one would have specific funding. And then it sounds like we can break up the Rinconada bid so we could take a more detailed look and from a menu of choices. So that sounds good.
Thank you. Yeah, that clarifies.
All right. Any further discussion, or do we have a motion to adopt the budget with those comments taken into consideration by staff?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by from Mayor Katamalahi, second by Councilmember Lawler. Councilmember Mekachek,
Aye.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Katamalahi,
Yes.
and Mayor Lupo.
Yes.
And that motion passes 5-0.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Moving now to new business, we have consideration of a letter to the California PUC opposing the proposed rate increases from San Jose Water on behalf of the city of Monte Sereno. And do we have a staff report on this, or is Mr. Mekachek going to be giving us that report? What are we doing on this?
Thank you, Mayor Luthold. Well, as you know, Councilmember Mekachek has been greatly involved in this process in producing this letter. So just a brief introduction to that, and thank you for his efforts. And he will, I guess, get into the details of the letter. I assume all of you have read it. I think it's an outstanding piece of work. So I hope council had a chance to look at it in detail and can present their questions to the group.
All right, and Councilmember Mekachek, did you want to give a little bit of a summary and presentation before we open to public comment, or would you rather do that in the discussion afterward?
Thank you. What I'd like to do is maybe give a brief overview and then answer questions in the discussion. I'd be very interested in hearing what the public has to say. So as an overview, I think that we're facing a very difficult situation in terms of the drought. And I don't believe that San Jose Water is acting in our best interest. I think they were once upon a time San Jose Water Company, and now they've evolved dramatically. And what's local here is now only part of their larger corporation. And I object to that. I'd like to say that I received input from a lot of different individuals. I didn't just come up with that document myself. And I circulated it to a number of people, and hence it evolved over time. But the most recent version speaks to having San Jose Water Company seeing audited financial results on a standalone basis. And I don't think the CPUC has considered that. So that's a change that I wanted to highlight as well. I believe that we as council members have sat on a number are seated on a number of JPAs that have fairly significant budgets. And for example, Mayor Pro Tem Elahi is on Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and that's a $305 million entity. And, San Jose Water is larger than that, but, it's not tiny as well. Council Member Turner is on the West Valley Sanitation District. And, there's the only difference between the water that comes into your house and the water and the sewage that goes out of your house, generally speaking, is the water that you use for irrigation and the water that you use for your swimming pool or to wash your car, just at the highest level. So I think that that San Jose Water Company let me back up, that the administrative law judge at the CPUC is going to request that San Jose Water Company respond to our letter. And so this is sort of step one. And I would like to have the support of council in having all of us sign the letter as was done previously, because I've been told that that carries a dramatic impact. As well, the people that you see copied on that letter are each of the municipalities, being the town of Los Gatos, the city of Campbell, city of Saratoga, the unincorporated county, so that they can let their council members and constituents know about it. As well, the boards of each of San Jose Water Company and San Jose Water Group are included on that, are being copied on it. For that, I'm available for questions.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for your hard work and dedication on this. I wanted to add, as you well know, I'm another of us who have expressed our disgust really at San Jose Water being purchased by Connecticut Water, our state authorities allowing that to happen. The water company straight up lying to us about the savings they intended to pass on to us, about what they were going to do with their executives and their shareholders, which of course they're now worried about share prices and they're rewarding their executives, all on the backs of us. And as you point out very astutely in the letter, the incentive structures are all wrong. They came back to us last time there was a drought and we saved water and complained that we didn't spend enough on our water because we were saving too much in the drought, and so they needed more money. And then they came back and tried to raise rates for the infrastructure that they've neglected for many years. And now they're going to create something that, again, disincentives the water savings. So I think you hit all the right notes on this, and really appreciate the work you've done, as well as the what you've put in terms of strategy about making sure that this gets the attention of the right people in the strongest possible way. So that's more in the nature of comments, but I did want to say thank you for everything you've done there, and great work. Mr. Elahi.
Yeah, I second Mayor Luthol's council member, check us down. They've been here before and just Mr. added items. So whatever pressure we can put on them to lower rates, that would be helpful. I know there's a number of other cities that are also doing the same. So unified effort from us may have some impact, and maybe we should be looking at raising your franchise fee if nothing else works. So I commend you on that letter. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, Councilmember Turner, I think you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to let you know that I fully support the point that our residents should not be paying the costs of supporting the conglomerate that San Jose Water has become. I think, the letter has made an excellent point on that. I also think this letter raises a good point about demanding accountability for water lost in the company system, rather than just building it into the rates, which is what they're doing now. However, I have one concern about this letter, and let me talk to you guys about it. I am concerned that the thrust of this letter seems to be to encourage CPUC to raise rates dramatically for people with swimming pools or large lots in order to force them to find ways to reduce their usage. I'm not really sure this is what our residents were expecting us to do. They're expecting us to oppose the San Jose water rate increases, not to advocate for increasing rates, right? So for me, the issue is fairly simple. Many of our residents are experiencing bi-monthly water bills in the thousands of dollars, okay? Some can't afford it. And I know somebody on Blanchard who is a master gardener that can't afford the water rates, especially our elderly. Now, looking at the San Jose Water financials, they do behave like a 100-year-old utility company that they're supposed to be. They do not behave like that utility company. They're mostly behaving like a growth company. Their revenues and their earnings are compounded at over 15% per year. Their stock, it has a PE ratio of 45, probably 3 times what one would expect, even in the market like we have now. They pay for their executives well above market, just like they pay executives in high-tech companies. Okay, their financial performance is prima facie evidence that their rates are too high. So here's what I want to do. I would like to see parts of the letter change to talk about the pricing structure to force conservation removed and replaced with a simple demand that says that the rates will be reduced across the board and that these never-ending demands for higher rates be stopped. Enough is enough. So that's my that's my diatribe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Councilmember Lawler.
Thank you. Yes, I get to follow Rowena's act. First of all, Councilmember Mekachek, thank you for taking a deep dive and putting together this very detailed letter. I echo Mayor Leuthold's sentiments. And I do have a couple of questions for clarity. One, did you leave Valley Water out of your opening paragraph for a reason as one of the JPAs that we sit on? Is that just an oversight, or is there a reason?
So that's oversight. I should include that. Thank you very much for that comment. That's super valuable.
Okay.
Yes, I will certainly make that change.
Okay, and then a couple other questions. You state that executive compensation for San Jose Water Company is in excess of market rates for a relatively small water utility in a stable geographic market. What water retailers of similar size are you comparing to San Jose Water, and where are they located?
The short answer is there's no visibility into the executive compensation, but when I looked at the compensation for the unconsolidated holding company, San Jose Water Group, it appears that not all the executive compensation is included in there. And I don't have hard numbers, but based on a 400 person organization, I can't see how the compensation for senior executives could run into the millions of dollars. I mean, that just doesn't work for me. And I would let San Jose Water Company respond to that issue and have them tell the CPUC how much they pay their executives in San Jose Water Company and how that compares to market.
Okay, so you actually don't have an answer to how you made that assessment. I'm just saying I'm just assuming that you're gonna need to back this up, but you're asking San Jose Water to provide this to the CPUC for determination?
That is correct. I mean, I could go off and do a benchmarking survey, et cetera, but I think that's up to San Jose Water Company to justify their expense, not for us to say, oh, well, this is wrong because of X, Y, and Z.
All right, so I just want to make sure that whatever comparisons we're making are to local water retailers in California. And then the second question I had was, you referred to overhead costs allocated to San Jose Water from its parent group as appearing excessive and exceeding market value. And do you have comparisons that you use to make that determination, or is that the same?
So I don't know how much they're charging from San Jose. Well, let me say it differently. The same executives are in San Jose Water Company and are in San Jose Water Group. And San Jose Water Group owns a number of different companies. And what they'll do is, I suspect, originally the payroll, some of the payroll is sitting in San Jose Water Company, even though those charges go to other entities. And if you, in the letter, it speaks to the affiliated transactions. If you could scroll down, please, Michelle, so that we get to the affiliated transactions. Ms. Radcliffe, could you scroll down on what's on your screen?
I have it. I believe it's on page 3, correct?
Let me reshare because I'm scrolling on my end, but it's not showing on to the public. Give me 1 second.
All right, so, well, okay, so basically what you're asking them is, you're saying that it appears and you would like them to demonstrate that
Precisely.
by furnishing these work papers.
And,
Okay.
and the other thing is that I had asked Mr. Tang multiple times for information, and he's not responding to me. So, you know, it's like, well, I could put a whole bunch of effort into it, which I did. I probably have over 60 hours in this letter. And if I have some more data, yeah, sure, I could spend more time on it. But I just know on the cover of it that it doesn't work.
Okay, that's fair. And then do you happen, again, this again is probably going to be for Mr. Tang, and he has not been very forthcoming with information, but do we know if there is an average industry-wide rate of unaccounted water loss? Like, is there like an industry norm for this? I mean, obviously for me, it should be 0, but.
There's always going to be water losses. And the issue is that they put very little effort into identifying those losses. And when you say industry-wide, what are the averages? Well, you know, if you're in Washington State, if you're on the East Coast, if you're basically anywhere east of the Mississippi, you don't have to worry about water losses that much because they're not catastrophic. And perhaps if we could just spend a moment, perhaps Ms. Radcliffe could share those photos that I got from Valley Water of the Anderson Reservoir. And you'll see how dire the situation is. And a lot of people, I've never seen these photos before today. So that's where the reservoir is supposed to be. There's the reservoir and the dam. That's what's there in December and not now. It's even lower than that now. It's almost gone. You know, this is again another picture from December. Like all that water that used to be available to us is gone locally, and we now have to import it. Valley Water has to import it, and the water that's coming is being cut by 50% at least from the federal project, and I think it's 30% from the state. So, you know, we're in a pretty dire situation, and that's why the emergency measures have been acted or requested regarding reducing our water usage across the board.
All right, thank you. Yeah, no, this is, no, we are definitely in very dire situation. And I just wanted, you know, I definitely support this letter and the arguments made therein, and I'm happy to sign it. And I just want to finish by saying that while we always must fight to protect our residents from excessive rate increases from our utilities, especially San Jose Water, we must also recognize the fact that California is a desert and water is scarce and water is expensive. And with Sacramento pushing for more housing, I'm really worried about our capacity to not only save water, but to provide water and to a larger population. So it frustrates me to no end that our legislators don't seem to be paying attention.
Well, Councilmember Lawler, we're on the same page, and I was super disappointed with San Jose Water, where they're saying that they're not projecting any increase in the number of water meters, which is their customer for the residential. And I'm thinking to myself, well, your numbers are totally wrong just based on what we're putting in at the Hacienda property and what Los Gatos is doing on the North 40. I mean, it's like their projections for 2022 are lower than those two projects combined. And that doesn't include Campbell or Saratoga. And the RENA numbers have not been considered whatsoever.
Right. No, I hear you. And like I was going to say, we have this aging water infrastructure, and we've talked about how some of our water mains are shy of 100 years old. And in order for our water retailer to provide reliable water service, and in order for our water wholesaler to be able to save water and we can have reliable supplies, at some point we must be able to let them invest in their infrastructure. So at some point, our residents and we are going to have to accept higher rates, because we have to invest. If we don't, we won't have reliable future water delivery. So that's my piece. We're in a very, very dire drought situation.
Thank you. Councilmember Turner, you have your hand up?
Yes. Yes, thank you. I actually started working on the San Jose water issue 4 years ago or 5 years ago now, when I first came on the council. And at that time, what they were doing with the water was taking our water and shipping it to Los Angeles, the Southern California. They also wanted to save the smelts, right? And so that's how we're in this situation today. I also did some research into the executive salaries about a year ago. So a year ago, most of the executives of San Jose Water are making $1 million a year. That's their salary. So, and in addition to that, they were having bonuses of $3 million a year. So that's how outrageous their salaries are. So having said that, I do support this letter. I would like us to make an emphasis, though, that we demand that the rates be reduced and end this never-ending demand for higher rates that San Jose Water keeps asking every year, 3 times a year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and formally open this to public discussion. If there are any members of the public, it does not appear that we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this, but just in case, if there are members of the public who wish to speak on this tonight, please raise your hand to be recognized under formal public comment here, and then we'll come back to council member discussion some more. Seeing none, we will close public comment and return this now to council member discussion and decision on this. I do have a question, Mr. Makachuk, and that is, you heard Ms. Turner's earlier comment about whether we're really, whether your letter is suggesting that if there is to be an increase, it be tied to volume, and whether that is something that kind of opens a door that maybe we don't need to open, and that we could just simply oppose things across the board. Is that, first of all, is that true in your letter, that you're suggesting that that really the volume pricing should be an incentive to disincentivize water use and to promote savings of water? And is there, if we were to want to respond to Ms. Turner's concern about that, is there an easy fix to kind of soften that and just say, we think this is outrageous across the board, we want the CPUC to do its job already?
Okay, so in response to that, as Councilmember Lawler pointed out, there are investments that have to be made in the water infrastructure, and someone has to fund that. And I've learned a lot about rate setting in the last month, 2 months. And the way it works is the water company is allowed to put in a general rate case and claim certain expenses for reimbursement so that their revenues will equal what their costs are plus the regulated rate of return. Now, to say that rates shouldn't go up is it just doesn't work. That's like, you know, I'd love to stop something, but life just doesn't work that way. You know, like the water company does have legitimate expenses that they should be reimbursed for. Now, the question is, how do you structure those rates so that you conserve water? And for people that are our residents that invest in reducing their water consumption, they should be rewarded financially for doing that so that people continue to reduce their consumption, because maintaining the current usage is not sustainable. So the short answer is that I believe Ms. Turner's request to say, let's just hold rates steady, and you know, people that use a lot of water shouldn't pay any more for water that people that use the bare necessity of water. And there is not a simple answer to that, but I believe the structuring the rates between how much you pay for your service connection and how much you pay for your variable cost of water, those, you should have a low fixed connection charge and a higher variable cost.
All right, thank you for addressing that. Councilmember Lawler, you had some more comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to back up Councilmember Mekachek's comments. Being from Southern California, yes, Councilmember Turner, we do take a lot of the water from up here. I'm sorry, but my experience having been a Los Angelino is that the DWP did exactly that. It incentivized people to save water. And for those who used more water than they were allowed to, had to pay a lot more for it. And it worked. I mean, that definitely worked for us, so.
Thank you. Ms. Turner.
Yes, so let me just say one more thing, right? I think we shouldn't be asking them to raise rates. We need to get the rates down. San Jose Water will take care of itself. We don't need to protect them. They're already making millions of dollars in their CEO salaries as well as their executive salaries. And I think it is their responsibility to bring down the rates and to bring down their executive pay. So that's my take on this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me go ahead. Another comment, and I know Mr. Mekachek, I'm definitely in support of the letter. I know you've put the time in. I think you've struck a really good balance with this. So I'm very much in support of the letter that you've prepared here. The other issue is talking to the CPUC, talking to the administrative law judge. And obviously that's where you have been and will be taking this back to and doing such a great job speaking to them on this. I really appreciate that. Obviously, the cynical side of me says simply that San Jose Water is where CPUC executives go to pad their salaries after they get out of public service, if you can call what they do public service. And that's a concern, just like federal officials going and becoming lobbyists and all of that. And I just hope that you can really speak from the heart to the administrative law judge, because that is someone that really is the last hope for standing between the CPUC, who represents us badly, if at all, and the water company who is out for their own interests here. So if you can help carry that message to the administrative law judge, I have a lot of faith in the system. I don't have faith in this system particularly because of San Jose Water's extreme power and influence and their cynical approach of asking for 24% and then saying they're doing us a favor when they reduce that somewhat. So those are my comments on this, and it looks like we've got some more hands. So Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a tough job. Obviously, I think the PUCs everywhere seem to work for the utility companies. Councilmember Mekachuk asked that we unanimously sign this letter and send it to the PUC because they'll give it more gravitas, I guess. So I would support the letter. Maybe a line could be added somewhere in the letter that while we prefer that the rates never change and stay the same, we understand where the rates may have to change for conservation purposes, because I think that's also necessary. So I don't know if you can formulate it that way so we can get Councilmember Turner also on board.
And Councilmember Turner. Councilmember Turner, additional comments?
Yes, I still would like that. I still would like us to ask them to reduce the rates though.
Yeah, so I think we can approve the letter with the minor corrections, the one Ms. Lawler pointed out, and maybe with what your concerns are and what Mayor Pro Tem Elahi pointed out, that maybe we can say that while it's our preference that rates not go up and in fact go down, that whatever is done about rates should certainly structure to promote conservation. And I think we can hit all of those notes. And I think we can approve the letter to be fine-tuned and then sent around for all our signatures without having every sentence wordsmith tonight. But we can approve it generally with a couple of minor changes and then circulate it for signature.
I would be delighted to take council's direction to amend the letter as stated, and then I would personally deliver the signing page so that each council member could sign it and/or they could come in. But it would be really good to get this letter into the hands of the CPUC administrative law judge tomorrow, and that's why it's dated June the 16th.
Great. So do we have a motion or do we have further discussion? Looks like we've still got a couple hands up. So Mayor Pro Tem Elahi and then Councilmember Turner again.
I'm going to lower my hands, but I will go ahead and make the motion in the meantime to approve the letter with the suggested change on it.
I'll second that.
All right. And it looks like we have no further hands up. So let's go ahead and take a vote.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Mekachuk,
Aye.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi,
Aye.
and Mayor Lugo.
Yes.
And motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. And so, yes, Mr. Mekachuk, if you want to circulate that either by making arrangements to bring it by directly for people's signatures or setting it up for e-signatures, you could probably set it up through DocuSign, working with Ms. Radcliffe using the city DocuSign if you wanted to get it out for e-signatures.
Okay.
All right, moving on now to committee and commission reports. Anyone have committee and commission reports they would like to give us tonight? Mr. Mekachuk is becoming active, looks like.
Yes. I was going to put together a work plan for the ad hoc finance committee, and I'd like to bring that to council at the next meeting. And I believe that the other ad hoc finance committee member is Council Member Turner. So I'd like to go back and forth with her between now and the next meeting, and then bring that to council next meeting.
All right, thank you. Any other committee and commission reports before we move on to some council member comments? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to council member comments. And I'm going to kick this off with a concern that has come up. It actually relates to future agenda items as well as council member comments here. And that is that Ms. Turner and I, again, buddying under the Brown Act, had a discussion about bringing forward the issue of potentially providing an appeal to the RENA numbers that have been assigned to us. That is coming up on a deadline early next month. Ms. Turner and I requested that that be on the agenda. We were assured that it was on the agenda for this week. When the agenda came out, it was not on the agenda, which is a direct violation of our rules regarding putting things on the agenda, and very concerning that staff took that off without getting the formal approval of myself and Ms. Turner. Very upsetting. And it has now put us in the position that we can only talk about it very obliquely tonight. And we're going to have to set special meetings if this is something that the council wishes to address in a timely manner. So this is very concerning. Mr. Leonardis indicated in an email, excuse me, that he had spoken with Ms. Turner and she had agreed to take it off. That is absolutely untrue. She wanted it on, she told it to be on, and I wanted it on and was assured that it was on and was never consulted when it was taken off. So huge concerns on this. It should never happen again. Any council member has the right to put anything on the agenda, and it should not be taken off without their specific consent. So now, coming to this issue, Ms. Turner can speak to this in more detail. The deadline for us to appeal the RENA numbers and the reasons why we might wish to appeal the RENA numbers, we could speak to briefly tonight. We can't take action because it's not on the agenda, but we will need to call a special meeting immediately on the minimum amount of notice if council believes that we would like to have this discussion to potentially have staff potentially file a timely appeal of this matter. So Ms. Turner, can you tell us a little bit about what the deadlines are and what your concerns are?
Yes, yes, Mayor Lutho, could you just tell me if I'm violating the Brown Act at some point in time? Because so let me give you the scenario here.
And again, we're just talking about potentially whether there is interest in putting this on for a special meeting in a timely manner, and we're just getting enough background to direction to make that decision. So we need to know why that decision is important and what the timelines are and why you care.
Yeah, so the decision to appeal our RENA numbers is closed after July 9th at 5 o'clock. The problem is we have to get data that Mayor Luthold and I need to put this together. And I don't think we are the subject matter experts on putting together this appeals process. It's a very involved appeals process. The city of Palos Verdes has one and it's 90 pages long. So what I suggested was that we get, I can never remember the name of that company, M3, Mayor Luthold, I mean, Mr. Leonardis. Anyway, we get a consultant.
The company's name is the M Group, and I did call them, and they were all out on vacation this week. We don't want to get too much into discussion other than process, but the reality of this not being on the agenda tonight, we just did not have the staff resources to do it, and it is the discretion of the city manager to pull something from the agenda when there is not enough information for council to make an informed decision. So I did a judgment call. I did consult with Ms. Turner, and there was discussion about waiting at certain points in time for other cities to get more, to see the results of the information they put forth. So I don't want it to be presented as there was truth not told about the whole, yes, we promised we'll put it on the agenda, sure, no problem. That was not necessarily the case. Had to make a judgment call, but we are allowed to talk process this evening. It is possible that council could say this evening, hey, the process moving forward is hire a consultant and draft a letter. And I can do that without potentially the council having a meeting, provided that the cost of the letter is within my signing authority. So if that's the process council wants to do moving forward, we may not have to have a special meeting.
Okay, so first of all, that is absolutely incorrect, and we need to address that issue, Mr. City Manager. There is no discretion whatsoever for the city manager to pull. It is simply not in our resolutions. Please reread them. Secondly, the request was to put it on the agenda for council discussion. That does not require any staff time beyond 4 sentences to put it on so we can discuss it without violating the Brown Act. That's all we wanted to do, was have the discussion tonight about the deadlines and the possible paths forward and whether we wanted staff to do anything. We don't need a staff report. We didn't need anything. What we do need to do is we need to know whether we want to, at this point, call a special meeting so we can have this discussion about whether or not we want staff to appeal, because we cannot make that decision tonight and we cannot have that discussion tonight. So we're looking at, do we want a special meeting on whatever the appropriate 24 or 72 hours is, so that we can simply, as council, without violating the Brown Act, have a discussion about whether or not we would like to pursue appeal, whether we're concerned about the cost, what resources we would use to do that. And it's not a letter. An appeal is a sophisticated document that we talk about. So we've now got several people who want to talk. Let's go with Mayor Pro Tem Elahi here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important appeal process that must be taken. I know Councilmember Turner has done a lot of work on this over the years, and you guys have all looked at it, and I've looked at it. So if we need to call a special meeting, let's do it, and let's call it within as soon as we possibly can. Other comment I have is agendas used to be posted at least or given to everybody at least a week before the meeting. For some reason, that has now slid to the Friday before the meeting, I believe. I suggest that we go back to the original timeline, which was the Wednesday before, because if something like this slips, that would give us a chance to say, hey, this shouldn't be on the agenda, and it could still be put on the agenda because you'd have you'd meet the required notice to have things on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. That is something that, again, I'd ask both the city manager and the city clerk to look at. We have set up very specific timelines for, I believe it's Monday, the week before, for council members to make any requests timely, Wednesday to publish the agenda to council, and that leaves us time to make corrections to the agenda before its legally mandated publication date. 72 hours before the meeting, which we treat as Friday at 5 p.m. But our intention is to publish the agenda Wednesday, which leaves us time to make corrections if somebody sees something wrong. So Councilmember Lawler.
Well, I was going to talk to something else, but let's go ahead and agree to arrange a special meeting at a mutually agreeable date.
All right. Yeah, Councilmember Turner.
Yes, but before the meeting, we need to be able to talk tonight about whether we can hire a consultant, because we don't have a lot of time. If we meet June 29th, then the consultant must have a draft for all of us.
Right. So the concern is we can't make that decision tonight. So Mr. Rudin, how quickly can we call a special meeting so we can have that substantive discussion about potentially hiring and what our choices are?
So a special meeting can be held within 24 hours notice. Given the reality of it's now 9:30 on Tuesday, probably the earliest you could have it would be Thursday night.
All right.
And there's no requirement to have it at any particular time. You can have it at a mutually agreeable time rather than 7 p.m. if that works for other people.
All right, Councilmember Makachek, you've got your hand up.
I will make myself available for a meeting on Thursday at whatever time you wish. This is important, and I'm there.
All right, I would suggest Thursday, perhaps at 6 o'clock. And this may be a relatively quick meeting. We do need to get some information about this and then give some direction. And it may be a series of special meetings that we have to do. And it's going to be a big burden on staff and whoever's working to make these deadlines. But that's the nature of the deadlines. Mr. Mekachuk.
Councilmember Turner seems to have spent a lot of time on this, and for that I applaud her. If you require spending money, please come to that meeting on whenever it is on Thursday. At 6 p.m. would work for me, with a full budget for all of the costs that you would foresee.
Well, thank you. And we may need some help from Mr. Rudin and from Mr. Leonardis to try to help flesh that out. It sounds like it's going to be a moving target. And again, we may have to have multiple meetings to pull this together. Luckily, we do have about 3 weeks before this is due. If we pull together, we can make informed decisions. And who knows, it may be a decision not to spend this money or not to file that appeal. But that's a discussion that we can have initially starting on Thursday. Ms. Lawler, you have your hand up still? And you're on mute. You're still on mute.
So sorry, it's up for something else. Are we finished?
Okay, no. So do we have nods all around for special meeting 6 p.m. on Thursday?
Yes, yes.
I can't be there. I have interviews scheduled to hire our city planner, so you'll have to make it at 7 or later.
And there's a Better Streets Commission meeting on Thursday at 7.
Do we want, is there an earlier time, Mr. Leonardis, on Thursday that you could do?
Our interviews start at 4, and Ms. Radcliffe will not be available either. I would recommend perhaps next Monday or Tuesday for the special meeting.
Could we do it on Friday? Is there any availability? And maybe even either a noon on Friday or with pretty much aiming for no more than an hour, so we can at least get direction moving.
I will not be available until at least 3 p.m. on Friday, given that I have a conflicting board meeting.
All right. Anybody else for 3:30 on Friday?
I'll make whatever work.
Works for me.
Yep. Okay. Looks like we've got enough. We've got a quorum of nods for 3:30 Friday. So we'll set that special meeting. We'll see what we can gather in terms of information to move things forward, in terms of if we can learn things about prices and what other cities are doing, great. Otherwise, we'll figure out our plan at that time. All right, so moving to Ms. Lawler's next item.
This is on a happier note. Last Friday, I met with Josh Silo over at West Valley Community Services to tour their newly renovated facility, and it is truly amazing. I hope you all get a chance to go over there and check it out. They're very proud of what they've done. Everything they do is about restoring dignity to our residents in need. So we are really fortunate to have this agency, and I'm so glad that we are supporting them annually. The food pantry heavily relies on donated food. It's 80% of their food is donated. They have a local farmers market on Friday, where grocery stores and local markets deliver produce. They also have 24 affordable housing units on their property because they lease the property from the county, and they were able to build these. I'm not sure if you were aware of that. It really is amazing. And they have a new program called the Park It Market, which is a renovated RV like food truck that they just launched this week, and it goes to various locations. So it's taking the services to the community that can't make it to the Cupertino site, providing food and onboarding services for their clients. So it should be a model for the rest of the Bay Area. So again, I highly encourage y'all to check it out. And I've even personally donated to their Adopt a Student program, which provides new clothing for kids going back to school. So hopefully that's something that we can alert our residents to and put that on the website. And that
Great,
is it.
thank you. Any other council member comments? Mr. Mekachek.
Yes, Councilmember Lawler, is there an opportunity for the Youth Commission to have some type of a project with that organization and to help them in any way?
Absolutely. Last year we did a food drive. West Valley Community Services can provide the bins, and they can do another food drive this year. There's also volunteer opportunities as well.
Great. Ms. Turner, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about the C-Click Fix project to see where that is, how that is coming along.
Yes, that's coming along swimmingly. I would say we had the contract signed by all parties, and they will be reaching out to us with their implementation team in short order.
Great. Ms. Lawler, you still have your hand up. Nope, it's disappeared. Okay, Mr. Elahi.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the discussion we had, that the agenda should go out on the Wednesday before the meeting gets an affirmance from the city manager and staff, so that we see that from now on.
Yes, with our 5 employees that we have working here, we will do our best to make that happen. As you know, we did not have the services of Mr. Samaranos. He had a death in his family, and that had also cost us some undue delays with the last agenda packet, which was very substantial. But we will do our best to make sure we get the agenda packet out a week early, and we appreciate council's patience when we are short-staffed. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Leonardis, we do understand and we do appreciate the hard work, and the criticisms really are directed to really involve the council more. And if there are ever any flags that need to be raised or more involvement that you need from council, certainly with the prior city manager, the council became very, very activist because the city manager wasn't getting a lot done, and the council was constantly forming ad hoc committees and jumping in and helping out. And I think we all appreciate that we're doing a little bit less of that now, and you and your staff are doing more. But again, raise the flag, ask for help if things are needed. And again, about this issue that we're now going to have the special meeting about, this was really the council wanting to take this on, have the discussion, and figure out a way to help rather than a way to burden staff more. So appreciate what you all do, and that it is hard, and these are tough times. So with that, let's go to your city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. We are proud to announce that we have secured a date and location for our picnic this year on August 22nd. And that is a Sunday. And the time of the picnic will be the hours of 11:30 to 2. And we are in the process of trying to find a food vendor. Our previous vendor, the Barbecue Boys or Brothers, or who they were, are no longer in business. So unfortunately, that was a very good vendor for us. I know the community very much enjoyed their food, but we do have some alternatives lined up. We're considering possibly food trucks as well. So the picnic is well in the works. August 22nd, mark your calendars. We will be sending out the postcards. And that is my comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's another area where council members have been helpful in the past in varying amounts. Please draft people as necessary to make sure that you're not overburdening yourself and staff, and that we're doing everything we can to help, or bringing in the community, of course, the Youth Commission, because we want to make this a really successful event and a happy event for everyone, and not overburden anyone with it. So thank you, and we look forward to helping on that. Councilmember Lahi, you still have a hand up. I don't know if you had an additional comment you wanted to make.
I think we still need a plan from the city as to when we're going to go back to face-to-face meetings. The governor's emergency order has expired, but I understand the governor has said that does not mean that the Zoom meeting cannot take place. So we can continue with the way we are doing our meetings, but I would like to hear from the city managers to what steps are being taken to go back to face-to-face meetings, and also how the city is going back to a post-pandemic event, because starting today, face masks are no longer required. Whether some people are going to be working from home, or is everybody going to show up? Our timings are going to be changing. So perhaps you can give us a report at the next meeting as to what is the proposal and how soon that will be implemented, and whether it's going to be in phases or at one time.
Thank you for your question, Mayor Pro Tem. And we are still on our schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 12 for our counter hours. However, I will be bringing staff back into the office more. They have been coming into the office more, actually, to serve the public Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. However, our counter hours, I think, will still remain. That has actually been very efficient. It's been working out quite well. So we could continue with that plan, but ease into more office presence for everybody who works here. And then, of course, we will ultimately be full-time. We did adopt a telework policy. Most businesses, agencies, I think, are still not going back until August, but we will be preempting that. We've always been ahead of the curve serving the public, and we've always been able to accommodate the public during this whole pandemic. So I'm very proud of Monte Sereno and our staff's ability to do that. But we will be easing in. We will have a plan going forward. Regarding live meetings, we'd love to see you all again. Although these Zoom meetings have been very efficient, I'm hoping that by August 3rd, which is technically our next meeting, other than the special meetings, which we might have, that we will be back in the council chambers. So yes, the governor issued the letter. They're not lifting the suspense on the Brown Act yet. So they're basically not saying it's entirely essential that we meet in person in the chambers yet. And I was looking for direction from, the state on that. But I do anticipate possibly by August 3rd, our next meeting, we could be back in the chambers. So that was my plan, should the governor lift the order on the Brown Act.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess what I'm looking for is a little bit more specific items. I mean, so if you have a formulated plan that could be put down in writing, and with obviously the contingencies that something may or may not happen, but it'll allow the staff and the public and us to kind of have some kind of framework as to where we're headed. So I would appreciate if you can put somewhat of a formal plan together by the next meeting, if it's possible. If you need more time, then you need more time. But I think that would be helpful.
Well, I think probably, rather than complicate things, is starting next Monday, the 21st, Monte Sereno will be open 9 to 5 for the public, and we'll just end it there. That's my plan. So all of our employees will be expected to be here from 9 to 5, and we will not acknowledge the telework policy.
All right, Mr. Mekachek, you've got a hand up.
Yes, I know it's getting late, but I wanted to say two things. First of all, it would be good to have a transitional plan and work in a hybrid model. I know that some of the JPAs are considering that, but nothing is cast in stone. So I think that would be good. The other comment that I wanted to make is that the city manager has been working on putting together a really good team here at City Hall. And I think that the new planner is a super important position, because what our business seems to be basically building homes and working on them, site development permits, subdivisions, etc., and also approving ADU applications. And I think that position is very important. So Mr. Leonardis, all the best in recruiting a top candidate to fill that position.
Thank you for the wishes, Councilmember Mekachek. We do have some excellent candidates we are interviewing Thursday. hope to make a decision by the end of the week, have the planner work with our existing planner the following week, the 21st through the 25th. And as you all know, Ms. Hamilton will be departing on the 29th of June. Will be her last day in the office.
All right, thank you. And yeah, I want to echo those sentiments, obviously, and a big thank you to Ms. Hamilton for the work she's done, the volume of work she's done, the skills she's brought to her position, the patience she's shown to the public and to the council. Really appreciate all that she's done for us, and giving us a long transition time so that you could work on finding a new person and getting them up to speed. So appreciate that, and appreciate your work, Mr. Leonardis, in hopefully working hard to select the right person. I also want to echo what was said by Mr. Mekachuk just now. I think I heard a little frustration in the back and forth there. I know I lead to some of the frustration here in the back and forth because I have high expectations. But I do think that Mr. Leonardis really working with what you can do, working with our staff to make sure that they're happy and know how appreciated they all are. Flexibility as we begin to transition back in terms of transitional plans. I haven't heard any complaints from citizens about the reduced hours and the efficiencies that that's brought. And as you mentioned, the efficiencies of these Zoom meetings and the Zoom mayors and managers meetings we've had. We've accomplished a lot more than we did in a lot of the in-person stuff. And I think that's also probably true of some of the telework that's gone on. So I think some flexibility there to meet the needs of all our employees. I know there's a lot of talk that people in industry may not be wanting to work where they don't get flexible plans. So certainly we don't want any disruption. And if you can work closely with all your staff to make sure everybody is happy and needs are met to the ability we can do so, that would be ideal. I see a bunch of hands up. So I think Ms. Lawler had hers up first.
All right, thank you. Yes, I actually, to your point, I'd like to thank our staff for all of your hard work and due diligence, and the budget presentation was outstanding. Thank you, everyone, for everything that you do. And I know, and Jeannie, gosh, thank you for being here, and I wish you all the best in the future. I do have a future agenda item if we're ready to move on to that, or we can wait, it's up to you.
Let's get Mr. Elahi's comments and then pop in for a future agenda item with you.
Yeah, thank you. No, I also wanted to express my appreciation to Ms. Hamilton. She's worked under some very stressful circumstances. She's been been the target of some citizens who have not been very happy at what she has produced because it wasn't quite to their expectations. But she's been steadfast as a rock and helped us through that process. And I wish her the best. And she's done a yeoman's job. She was one of our last staff members from a couple of years ago and the most experienced on it. So I'm looking forward to our city manager hiring through this process. I mean, we've got a good city manager who can probably hire some talent that we on the budget and everything else. I think City Monte Sereno is blessed. We have a really good staff, and they're working hard. So staff only 5, but they can accomplish a lot. So thank you for all your hard work, guys.
Thank you. All right, back to Ms. Lawler for future agenda items.
All right, thank you. Well, given our drought situation, I think we should agendize a discussion regarding our water conservation and landscaping ordinance. I was reading it the other day and noticed that there is no mention of requiring drip irrigation to be installed. So I think given our situation, we should probably take a look at that and see what other water saving measures we can ask homeowners to use, including the gray water systems that you and I discuss as an ad hoc committee, in ways that we can get future builds in existing homes to use these systems. And not only will this save water, but it will also save our residents water costs down the road. Thanks.
All right, sounds good. So you're just generally looking for a discussion on that and at an appropriate time, not a specific, on a specific date, do a specific task at this point, but you're bringing it up as something for us to look at soon when we come back in August.
Yes, if we can look, the sooner the better, because time is of the essence, I think, on this.
All right, sounds good. Anyone else for future agenda items? Seeing none, I guess that brings us to a close. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you, Ms. Hamilton, for your service to the city. We do wish you all the best. And thank you to all the staff for all of your hard work and all you do. With that, I adjourn the meeting of the City Council for June 15th. Thank you much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.